Our next talk is from Ron Burkett. He is the Director of Sales Engineering at Zscaler. He's got 20 years of experience in the networking security industry and has been deeply involved in developing emerging security and networking strategies for Fortune 1000 customers. Ron currently is tasked with helping customers develop zero trust networking strategies by adopting, did I say something wrong? Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Your introduction, you're messing me up. All right. Okay, currently Ron is tasked with helping customers develop zero trust networking strategies by adopting cloud software defined networking strategies and FedRAMP certified solutions for U.S. federal government agencies. Thank you, Ron.
Good evening. How's everyone doing tonight? Woo! B-Sides Raleigh. All right. So, hey, you guys kind of already saw the next slide. I was at the booth today, and one of the guys came by and he said, hey, I really like B-Sides because you guys have so much more and better beer than the DevCons. And I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, what's relevant to that? Well, so, yeah. Too early? Is that bad? No, so, yeah, I just couldn't resist having a little fun while we were here and saying, yeah, I like beer too. In fact, I still have mine, so I hope you're all drinking and enjoying the evening, so thank you. Anyways, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but everything's always a little better if you have beer mixed in. So, we've all grown up with networks and building traditional perimeter security. By the way, I'm struggling to stand here. I like to walk when I talk, but they gave me a fixed microphone and a camera in back. So if you see me grabbing on, I'm about to throw this podium because I'm used to walking around. But anyways, networks are great, right? But we've all built them for years. They've been around. There's a couple problems with them. One of them is users, right? If we didn't have any users on our networks, wouldn't they be great? So, little quote here from one of my favorite characters, Michael Scott. When the Crown Prince of Nigeria contacts you directly, you don't ask questions, you help where you can, right? So this kind of describes how our users interact with our networks. They have no clue that they're doing things wrong, even when they're well-intentioned. Or if any of you are unemployed and you're sitting at home watching Maury Povich all day long, all right? When asked, what did you click on, you said nothing. The 12 toolbars in your browser determined that was a lie. So we've all been there. Users are tough, right? They do things they shouldn't. They don't have a clue. And they're just trying to do their jobs. The end result in a lot of cases is compromises for us as security professionals dealing with the issues that come as a result of users not being educated. And it doesn't matter how hard you try. So, I started thinking, what's it really take to protect your network? And how do you keep the bad guys away? So I'm like, well, let me think about what should be a really simple network to secure. So I started thinking back to some things I did on my own home network. So I'm like every good IT geek, right? And that I spend a lot of time locking down my home network and using all the technologies I've worked with over the years to build a secure network. Now, just for a little background, that means, in my home I have a really expensive power bill, bunch of EXX servers, tons of IoT devices in today's worlds, cameras, Amazon Echoes, you name it, using the internet. No big deal. I also have, typical user base. I have the Michael Scotts of the world on my home network, as well as some sophisticated ones. So, but you would think it's still relatively easy. I'm just protecting, my wife, my 3 boys, 2 of them teenagers, 1 of them preteen, and a foreign exchange student from South Korea. Now, I did say South Korea. Don't worry, it's not a North Korean hacker, right? This is South Korea, easy kid to deal with. Should I be able to keep that safe? And we would logically think if that's all you have to protect, I should be able to do it and keep it safe. So like any good IT geek, I kind of put everything in my house. Full next-gen firewall, full SSL inspection. Actually, not just SSL inspection. I had it twice. I had 2 different devices doing it, feeding different things. I actually had full packet capture in my house, right? So I had content filtering, AV scanning, IPS, IDS, literally. So, again, all that for 5 users, a handful of IoT devices, should be good to go, right? And, you know, as I went through it, first of all, I don't want to completely knock it. It was good. Caught my, at the time, 14-year-old boy sneaking up at night playing Xbox. Of course, no one plays without being online, right? So it was really easy to track his activity. He wasn't really happy with the results. Caught another one of my boys actually using Instagram as a chat mechanism, because we didn't allow him to chat with people at the time. He was a younger kid, didn't want him chatting with all the girlfriends out there. And they were actually going on Instagram in the comment section and tagging each other, and they were meeting at Jake's face. Is what they did every night. And they would literally get together and we found it. So my security tools serve their purpose. In fact, my kids would say, Dad, why is it so hard here? No other kids get this level of scrutiny. And I said, well, that's what happens when your dad's in IT, right? You have to deal with these type things. But, you know, again, you would think it'd be relatively easy to secure. But, you know, again, you put an Xbox on your network, a Ring doorbell. And what did I have to do for SSL inspection? I had to make an exception. What did I have to do for my other tools? I had to make an exception. You know how many times I rang the Ring doorbell and drove my dogs crazy trying to test why the Ring wasn't working? It's crazy, right? Now, I know this is a consumer level device. You're saying, Ron, I don't have those type things. But the fact is, you know, when you have all these different things out there, you're building exceptions for them, right? And it makes it very difficult to have a secure network. In fact, you know, as it turns out, I thought I had it really good. So, in fact, it was so good, I made a video for the company I worked for at the time and said, look, my kids came home with their friends and they were watching illegal movies. They didn't even get a virus. Because they started talking about this thing I'd never heard of called Putlocker 9. And then all of a sudden, they're playing videos of movies that are currently in the theater. And I'm not talking like the quality where someone recorded it with a camcorder. I'm talking full HD quality. And, you know, my antennas are just up and going off and going crazy. Like, what are you guys doing? So I started looking at the logs and all my traffic. And I found all kinds of bad stuff, and it was blocking it. And I'm like, this is great. So I actually said, kids, this is good. Bring all your friends over. Play all the bad stuff, and I'm going to record the traffic. And I did, and I made this really cool video, and I went around proudly proclaiming on my network security pitches throughout the U.S. saying, look, you can even watch illegal movies, and we'll keep you secure. And so I was at the height, right? And what always comes before, you know, right before the fall, you have that pride right before it. Well, yeah. We're not gonna go there, right? So anyways, a few months later, turns out I started looking around at one of my servers running on my LAN, and you know, I had a bunch of files there that shouldn't have been there. Now, thankfully, it wasn't serving it to the open internet, but they made it inside my network. Guys, I'm back. Thank you. I think the AV has a virus here. So the point was, I couldn't even keep my wife, 3 teenage boys, and a foreign exchange student safe on my network. And by the way, I didn't just have the vendor I worked for. I had every one of you that uses some other security device, I had that in there too. All right? Every one of those devices, and I couldn't do it. So, you know, how do you deal with it? And you're like, Ron, it doesn't matter. What you said, you know, again, I have all these other tools. I have a lot of people looking at this, and they're dealing with it on a daily basis. And if that was the case, we wouldn't see things like the Verizon breach report, or, you know, people wouldn't make statements like, it's not a matter of, you know, if you get hacked, it's a matter of when you get hacked. And we've all heard these statements, and we know there's at least a certain amount of truth to them. So, you know, I was sitting down with a good friend of mine. Like most IT guys, he likes to drink scotch and smoke cigars with me, which, by the way, anyone will stay out tonight, I'm happy to, you know, help you understand how to do that well. So he's like, Ron, it doesn't matter. I have network segmentation. He goes, and this guy happened to manage a network for a school district. By the way, again, school district kids will do anything to get to what they want, right? He's like, we don't care if they even get infected. We just re-image their machines. They're on a separate network from all of our administration. I said, huh? He goes, yeah, don't you have HIPAA and PCI and other regulations with student data and health records and everything out there? And they said, yeah, but again, they're in a different network. I said, oh, so the student's not allowed to plug in or steal his teacher's password and get on the Wi-Fi for the administrative network? He goes, well, no, I can't help it. And then the other IT guy next to me goes, hey, yeah, Ron, he's a school district. I have NAC too. All right. Yeah, who in here has tried to implement NAC? Yeah, and who here has no exceptions to their NAC and it works perfectly? Right, yeah, we've all been there. Look, it's an awesome tool. I'm not saying you shouldn't do NAC. I'm not here to downplay NAC. It's great. I would highly suggest you all have it. However, let's not pretend that it's going to give you peace of mind and it's really going to make things work because every copy or every other type of device in the world you make an exception for, or worse yet, the VP comes in and says, hey, I can't get to where I need for my iPhone or my iPad. And then you build yet another exception, and you're trying to relate a user to layer 3, layer 4 rules and ACLs you have on your network equipment. So, NAC, again, it sounds good, but with the explosion of IoT and contractor access to different devices today, it's really hard to have a comprehensive NAC strategy. So what ends up happening is you have this crazy and vicious cycle. You constantly are trying to defend against the latest threat. You find there's a lot of cool things out there to stop that threat. You put it in your network, right? You block it and another threat comes and it just keeps coming over and over, right? It's kind of like, hey, we had another breach. Guess what? We got a little more money. Oh yeah, we get another tool, right? And there's just a few vendors in the cybersecurity space, right? A few hundred. It's one of the highest backed venture capitalist industries in the world because there's so many threats and so many different ways to defend against it. And look, there's a lot of good vendors up here, right, that do a lot of really good things. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't do basic blocking and tackling and protect your network, but it just keeps becoming a vicious cycle. So here's a picture of one of our customers' networks. This is all the active endpoints in their network at a given snapshot in time. So hundreds of thousands of endpoints, all different types of endpoints, all different types of users from, Michael Scott to the millennial that knows how to actually use his computer well, all using that network and all creating different security-related types of events, right? And so, we've all lived this world. The way we've done it in the past is we built this castle moat mentality. We build our networks. We put a stack of security devices there, keep putting more and more security devices there. And of course, we have users traveling outside and they want to get back in the network. So we put a stack of security appliances to let them get back in the network. We do the same thing for remote offices. We connect the remote offices and make our network even bigger. Right? And now a lot of us are going, hey, no worries, I'm moving to AWS, I'm moving to Azure, put my network stack in there. But yeah, what are you doing? You're putting the same security stack in there to protect your users going in and out. And all you've done is make your network footprint even bigger. And again, we're all guilty of this. We've been doing this for the past 15, 20 years. So at the end of the day, if you really honestly approach it, you can't secure your network. You can't afford your network. You can't write it and grow it and scale it in an efficient manner. You really don't trust your network. You see the quote there from GE. He said, our network has morphed and grown over time to become essentially an unmanageable beast. All right? And that's the truth of what a lot of us have because we have so many things. They've just gotten bigger and we keep adding tools and complexity to it. So it all begs the question, why do you still have one? Why are you still trying to look at the old world and the old ways of doing it, saying, why do I still have a network? It's kind of like this. So if you ever travel to Florida, take a look at the sticker on any of their vending machines. And it basically tells you, if they don't have this sticker, call us. Well, first of all, that's kind of hard. So why do you need a sticker to tell you that? Because you can't call about a vending machine problem. So why do you have to have the sticker? Because you just have to have one. That's how most people look at their networks. Because someone told me I had to have a network. I had to make it bigger and give everyone access to it. I didn't do that again. It's all right. So at the end of the day, I don't need slides, right? At the end of the day, we have more risk, more complexity. We have no easy way to secure users, right? And so we have to really start thinking about different ways we can approach this. And this is where Zero Trust Networking was born. So zero trust networking is a completely different approach, right? Instead of making your network bigger, adding your remote sites to your network, we're going to take a different approach and say no one is automatically trusted. So that's, again, that's the fundamental flaw that we've all worked with over the past years. If they can get on our network, they're allowed to get to the applications. We must trust them if they can get on the network. That means we're trusting that our NAC and our network segmentation and our ACLs and everything else are correct. But it's just not the reality in today's world. They've become so complex. So zero trust networking is about saying, I'm only going to allow a user, after I've authorized who they are, done some type of posture checking, verify that they're actually a user, not stolen credentials because they're on a valid machine. Maybe we even validated their location. Hey, this user just, we know that travel, booked them on a flight to Singapore, so it's okay, they're accessing it from Singapore, but this user wasn't, so even though their machine or their user passed the credentials, they're not safe. So then you give them access to an application. So no more, I'm on the network, and I directly have access to applications. That's what zero trust networking is about. What it really means at the end of the day, too, is that you now simplify your network design. Where your applications live, just need outbound internet access. Where your users live, just need outbound internet access. They connect to some controller, could be in a cloud or could be hosted somewhere private. That controller then makes a decision and says, based on who you are and based on posture, that you're able to get into that application. Now, the cost savings alone on networking costs, MPLS, things of that nature, can make this very attractive to anyone. You say, wait, Ron, it's kind of a panacea, right? Well, yeah, but there's actually companies doing this. Google Beyond Corp has done it today. Companies like GE have done it today. Many others are on that path. And when you start thinking in that manner, it really reduces what you have. Now, it's going to create a few other problems, but let's just review a few other important things that you want to think about when you're designing a zero trust network. One, never put users on your corporate network, right? They can only access applications if they're going through your software-defined perimeter, right? All your application policies are app-centric rather than network or layer 3-centric. If you make policies based on layer 3, you're depending on a network team to build out the ACL correctly. You're depending on the complexity being there. You're not overrunning CPUs on equipment that's not meant to have that. And keeping up with all that and how things are designed and that someone didn't put an application where they shouldn't. But two, that doesn't mean you just put your applications on the internet. They should be completely dark to the internet. Right? A user should only gain access to them because the software-defined perimeter allowed them to gain access. But we should allow the transport medium to get them there to be the internet, which is point number 3. Right? If we can make the internet the transport, now all I need is a user to sit at home, sit at Starbucks or a branch office, and guess what? They all look the same. Right? And that really simplifies my networking for my branch offices. All my branch offices now can be very cheaply connected sites that looks very much like an internet cafe. I don't have to buy expensive maintenance contracts. I don't have to buy expensive MPLS links. I don't have to buy a lot of things. In fact, you can buy some really low-end devices, even if and you could certainly use other things like SD-WAN to incorporate with it. If you do have a few needs or traditional networking things like VoIP that you need to route back to the corporate office, that's fine. So it doesn't preclude anything like SD-WAN, but it says we're going to use our internet as our transport. And then last but not least, you shouldn't depend on any network-based segmentation. This should all be at the app level. It should inherently say that this user or this group or whatever definition you want to make is what controls access or who has access to that application. Right? So all this should happen, by the way, transparent to the end user because we want to make the end user process better. One of the biggest problems when people will start extending their network and adding branch offices, adding lots of VPN concentrators, is the fact that at the end of the day, user experience is bad. First of all, half of them don't even know how to fire up a VPN. Anyone here ever try to use a VPN on GoGo on a plane, by the way, too? That works well, right? And then a user spends the whole time struggling with it. They start revolting, and there's the start of a lot of your shadow IT because you haven't made it easy for your users. So we want to do something that allows the performance to work, but yet makes it easy to manage and doesn't make our network that unmanageable beast. So what are some of the things that you can do to start down this path? Number one, and you should know I'm being serious when I tell this because Zscaler has nothing to do with authentication. You need to get your authentication in order, all right? So authentication is a main tenet of zero trust security or zero trust networking and software-defined perimeters because you need to prove who you are first. Once you prove who you are, then you can gain access to applications. So if you haven't already started this path, make sure you're cleaning up, getting to a good SAML-based provider. Start integrating all of your SaaS-based apps into it as well. So you have one single source of truth of who is out there and what they're allowed to access. So 2, what else can you do? You can start with those nasty contractors. Man, I feel bad for Target. They've been the story of so many people's speeches for years because of the HVAC contractor that you've all heard about. I realize if you start on a journey to zero trust networking, that it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be something you may do overnight. So why not start with the guys that you really don't want on your network at all in the first place? Make them start using the zero trust networking. Then start discovering, start cataloging your applications so you can build out the appropriate policies. Because again, we want our policies to be app-centric, not layer 3, not network-centric, and define what users can get to what applications. And then 3, as you're preparing, expect your network team to hate you. All right? You're threatening their jobs. Because you just said, I need to replace every site with an internet cafe. All right? An internet cafe. Do you need BGP and a bunch of, I know I'm in Raleigh, right, in RTP, and I might be saying the wrong thing here. But do you need all these complex networking strategies? No, you need a device that can simply forward your traffic out to the internet, right? An application on an endpoint potentially to help you with that software-defined perimeter and posture checking. So expect that you're going to have a problem. Don't underestimate it. This is the biggest area most people struggle with. They start throwing up all the different issues of why you can't do zero trust networking, because again, if you start down this path, you're threatening the livelihood of a lot of people's jobs and what they do for a corporation. In the end, because you've simplified your network, which is one of the reasons why you've increased performance and why you've been able to then gain a lot better security around your applications. And see, you didn't even have to hear anything about Zscaler today. I did that all vendor neutral. Any questions or comments from the audience? Go ahead. Correct. Yeah, great question. So for those of you who didn't hear the question, it says you're assuming you have a user behind every endpoint. What do you do for things like phones and cameras that don't necessarily have a user behind them? And that's a great point. Those type of items typically don't need access to the network in the same way either. Or if they do, it's a very separate network for that distinct purpose. And that's why, zero trust networking providers should also work closely with all your different SD-WAN providers. That's where a lot of them come in. You're also seeing the advent of things like Skype for Business. It's a cloud-based controller. They just need access to the internet. You don't actually have to have it communicate directly except for peer-to-peer direct phone conversations. And in those cases, again, you may have some type of SD-WAN or simple, even homegrown VPN backhaul for isolated network just for voice that no other application or user traffic is on. And that's typically how you would deal with a lot of those IoT-type devices. Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead, question. Fair statement. It's but that's not what I'm saying necessarily. That's the result of it. Yes.
You're buying all this network equipment, and you depend on it. You just have to keep buying more.
Yeah.
Because the next problem depends on buying more equipment. But the other thing I wonder is, are you drawing any of your zero trust stuff from Project Jericho?
Project Jericho. So I can't say personally if any of our developers or any of our early thought leaders actually were involved or knew that. It's something in our case with our company has been mentioned. There's been a lot of things from our own customers as well as Google Beyond Corp, as well as some of the things in the federal government that have been asking for this type technology and kind of just saying, boy, I wish I didn't have to have all these things. Help me, Zscaler, imagine how I could accomplish this goal. And, Zscaler didn't start with zero trust networking. We started with protecting outbound internet access. And out of these conversations is what was born when they said, man, we're trying to stop the bad guys from keeping mostly the end users from being infected, right? And then catch any outbound traffic when something is infected, whether it be an end user or some other point. But how could we prevent it and never make it happen? Which is to separate it, and that's how it was born at Zscaler. So a little bit different background. But to answer your question directly, I have no clue if any of them had any involvement or knowledge of Project Jericho. Good question, though. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead. Take it away. The question was, how would you recommend security network from a teenager? Man, my kids are tough. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I still make my youngest kids slide their phone under the door at night. Nothing like a good old school, you can't have access to it. And, soup Nazi, no soup for you. That works. You can get any level of consumer devices today, in all honesty, though, and do things like shut off the internet at night. That's where I start. And, I thought I heard a comment back there. I'm not sure what it was, but yeah, I keep them off of it. I mean, look, kids are smart. I shared the story of my kid on Instagram using his chat because we blocked chat from them. They're going to find a way around it. So are your users in your corporate network. If they want to do something. So look, you should never forego basic blocking and tackling internet security for whether they're home users or corporate users. That means when users go out to the internet, you want to do everything from content filtering to AV scanning to SSL inspection, a lot of the things that I talked about. At home, that's going to be harder to do all those things. At home, you're going to settle for some basic content filtering. Even Zscaler offers things in partnership with some of our OEMs like Arrow Wireless, where they use our shift-based product for DNS-based security. It's a good start for a home user. There's no perfect answer for that. For a corporate user, again, you want to make sure you're doing all those things because you don't want anyone to do credential stealing or harvesting, even if you block the bad malware. Yep. Yes. Yeah, there's a question back there.
You mentioned partnerships. Do you feel like layer 7 application firewall vision and antivirus on the firewall for small office, home office users is going to become more pervasive in coming years?
So just to make sure I understand the question correct, you asked about layer 7 application type firewalls and AV scanning right on the firewall. Are you talking about for things you're hosting internally and serving to the internet, or for users going outbound? Yes. So the inbound stuff is different. Most people they're not going to do much of anything on the inbound side on a consumer level device. It's too complex of a world, especially with SSL, and the average consumer is not going to understand how to put their web server certificate on their firewall as well to do all those type of things. For outbound, most definitely it's going to get better, but there's going to be limits. Again, try explaining to a home user how to set up man-in-the-middle SSL inspection. And try to make sure they understand that it doesn't work for their iPhone because they do cert pinning. It's going to be incredibly difficult to teach them how to do that and build exceptions. Even myself, I mean, that was one of the things, my points of talking about being difficult to secure your network and making it complex is the fact that I had to build so many exceptions when I ran all these network devices in my network and security devices that literally, I mean, I had ACLs and policy-based routing going on in my home network, and I had all kinds of stuff. And then I said, well, I have a guest network. I want to make sure they can't get over my other network where all my media files are at. And that was for 5 users. And so it's incredibly difficult. So yes, they're going to get better. They're going to do some of the things, and they're going to come with a lot of free services. But they're always going to be basic level services that are easy to turn off. From a consumer point of view, the worst thing you can do is block something and break it rather than let them get infected. So it's a completely different mindset than corporate. And that's why iPhones and those type devices have caused so much trouble for us, is because we're trying to bring a device that was really designed in a consumer model into a corporate network, and we've had to build exceptions, which again gets to the whole point that Lisa so eloquently pointed out for me, which is you cannot secure it. Right? Which is why you want to think about your applications differently and get them completely on a separate network. All right, am I about to get yanked? I see someone walking towards me. Is my time up? All right, go for it.
Don't have this problem, you're lucky. Legacy applications, take green screen, 3270 terminal, that garbage that's from yesteryear.
Yep. So good question. So the question was, a lot of our old applications like 3270 terminal emulation, will this work in this zero trust model, or do you have to re-architect them? So every vendor's implementation of zero trust networking has its own nuances of how they work. In the case of Zscaler, it's going to work with any IP-based protocol, right? So I shouldn't say any, there's always exceptions, right? But anything that's client-initiated connection, right, is going to work. And so it's not limited to port 80 and 443 if that's what you're asking, typical HTTP, HTTPS. There are versions of that with a lot of vendors, and those are typically what people call browser-type access. And those don't require a client or an agent on the endpoint. If you want to get above anything that's above a web browser, you're almost always going to have an agent on the endpoint accessing that application, because you're going to have some type of shim in the network stack to forward traffic to it. Again, there are other things like even active FTP is a great example of something that's very hard to make work in this model, because there's a connection initiated by the server. And it's not quite the same as a firewall. You don't want an application layer gateway sitting on there to allow it to automatically open up a connection inbound. So there are a few apps that would fall into that category, but by and large, most apps are going to work in this model. You know, VoIP is the question asked earlier is another great example of something you don't want to send over a TLS tunnel because it's latency sensitive. And all these models are going to depend on some type of TLS or secure tunnel. And so you're going to want to send that traffic raw and direct. But I guess if you're having a private conversation, that might be a little scary, but you're already doing that today and sending it over all these public links. Yeah.
Your first thing to do is to know your user, essentially. And that applies across the board. Green or an IoT device talking all by itself.
Yeah.
That goes a long way for solving a lot of problems.
Yeah, and it really helps you when you start to implement it well. One of the really cool things about zero trust networking is gone is a day of a business division just turning on an application and people having access to it and IT not knowing about it. Because for them to make it work for their users, if you've totally, again, the goal is a dark data center. No users directly connected to the network. They have no access to the application. So now if you've adopted this model, anytime a business unit adds an application, it doesn't work until you add it to the list of applications and who's authorized to gain access to it. So it really solves a lot of problem and actually helps purchasing and everyone else along the way. Any other questions? All right, awesome. I think last order of business, sorry, before you clap, I have to give away this Yeti that was at the Zscaler booth. Is this the cards that were drawn? Anyone? Who has a list? Here it is, yes. All right, so first name on the list, Adam Noonan. And there's candy in it still, so. Candy. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great night.